IELTS writing tests, Task 1, General, Semi-formal letter. In this video, I'm going to be introducing how to write a semi-formal letter, and in doing that, I'm going to compare and contrast it a little bit with the formal letter, which is the video that I previously made. You might like to check that video out later. We're going to be looking at how to identify a semi-formal letter, how to plan your letter before you start writing, how to structure your letter. I'm then going to be giving you a sample answer that I wrote and just walking you through that letter sentence by sentence so that you can understand how I wrote it and how you can write your letters. Finally, we'll end with our homework task for you keen students out there who like to do homework. And note that I have a writing correction service. You can send me your letter. I will check it. I will give you a score for each of the 4 grading criteria, and I'll give you ideas about how you can increase your score. So last time we were looking at a formal letter, and that required you to write a letter wanting to apply for a job at a company. Today's task is going to be less formal. We're going to be writing a letter to somebody who gave us a birthday present. Let me just quickly go over the task instructions and how you should interpret them. The grey box in the middle changes with each writing test. The area outside of that box is always the same for each test. So each test you're recommended to spend about 20 minutes of your 1 hour on task 1. Remember, task 1 is worth 1/3 of your score and task 2 is worth 2/3 of your score. So that's why you want to spend about 20 minutes on your task. You must write at least 150 words, and if you don't, you get a -1 off your score for task achievement. So always make sure you write at least 150 words. You never need to write addresses, and I strongly suggest you don't, because it'll be weird, because nobody does. And weird is not good in the IELTS test. You're given instructions about how to begin your letter. This does actually change a little bit, but usually when it's a semi-formal task, they just give you the one word dear, and it's up to you to write maybe the name of the person, and you could make up the name of the person, or basically to decide how you're going to start your letter. Now, with the previous letter, we started with the Dear Sir, Madam. I don't suggest if you're writing a letter to a friend and you write Dear Sir, Madam, that's just weird. Even Dear Sir is weird. Let's say it's a male friend. Why is it weird? Because you don't say that to your friends, do you? It'd be Dear John or Dear Sarah, right? So it's pretty weird to start a letter like that. I suppose if it wasn't a really that close a friend, you might write Dear Mrs. Smith, but that's a bit weird too. So I would just make up the name of a person. So Dear Mike, Dear Sarah, right? Make up the name of a person. It doesn't have to be a Western name, but I think that would be better. Now, let's take a close look at what the specific instructions are for this task before we go on to plan it. So let me just read it out for you. A friend of yours recently gave you a nice birthday present. Write a letter to your friend. Thank them for the present and say why you particularly liked it. Describe what other presents you received. Explain what other things you did. So there's always 2 parts to planning a letter. The first thing is to think about the purpose of the letter and how we're going to respond to it. And the second one is how we're going to respond to each of the bullet points, right? We must respond to all 3 bullet points or we can't get to band 5 and above. And we must respond fully to every bullet point in order to get to band 6 and above. Don't go throwing away marks just because you didn't make a plan, right? It's really important to make a plan to make sure that you're going to get 6 and above for your task achievement. And the plan saves you time. Do all your thinking together as a discrete activity, then go on to writing. What wastes time is when you're writing and you have to stop to think. It breaks the flow of your writing, and so a plan actually saves you time. It's not a waste of time, it saves you. It saves you time, and it decreases the risk of you not responding well to the instructions. For this type of letter, I'm going to have 8 parts. I'm going to have a greeting to the person, dear Tom, or something like that. I'm going to have probably a soft opening followed by the purpose. Now, with the formal letters, we just had a purpose only. We just state our business. I'm applying for a job or whatever. However, with friends, with people we know, we might sometimes want to write something just before the purpose. Otherwise, it can seem a little bit kind of too direct and cold and stiff-collared, overly formal. So often a soft opening is appropriate, and it will be for this letter because you're writing to a friend, right? When you're writing to a friend, you don't normally go bang straight into the purpose. You say something pleasant first, like I hope you're doing okay, or something like this one's about a birthday party, so I hope you had a great birthday, something like that, before you get into your purpose. Then we're going to have a paragraph about bullet point 1, another for bullet point 2, another for 3. Then we need some sort of closing sentence, and then we can get on to signing off our letter. It's yours faithfully. If we don't know the person, yours sincerely. If we do know the person, it's a friend, you know them, you should be using yours sincerely. You could write something like cheers or best regards to, I guess, and that's because then it becomes like an informal letter and we can write informally to our friends. But I still think you could just write yours sincerely. Really what I want to say is don't take the risk of being too informal in your letters, and also I'm a person who just likes, like, you can just memorize 2 ways of finishing letters rather than multiple ways. So you need yours faithfully if you don't know the person, and yours sincerely if you know the person. That covers all situations, no loss of marks. So why experiment, take risks with other types of ways of finishing your letters? And then for this letter, you could just put your first name. But again, I would suggest you could put your first and family name in there, because it wouldn't be weird to write yours sincerely, Mike Whitey, because he might know lots of Mikes, and so now he gets my letter and it's Mike Whitey. Oh yeah, I like that Mike. It's not that other Mike I don't like, or something like this, right? And again, you can get in the habit of writing the first and last name so that you'll always be right. Doesn't matter the instructions. It doesn't matter you're writing a letter to a stranger to apply for a job or one of your friends. You can write the same thing. So I'm a big fan of this. Standardize things as much as you can, because when you're in the test, when you're under pressure, you might make bad decisions. So if you're not in the habit of writing both, and then you do a different task, applying for a job, and you just write Mike, not okay, throwing away marks. So one of the ways to decrease risk and decrease the risk of throwing away your marks is to standardize parts of the letter, right? And that's why I'm saying you can just use yours sincerely and then Mike Whitey. It'll be right for this letter, and it'll be right for a formal letter when I'm writing to someone I know. Okay, so let's look at how we start our letter. Dear Thomas. I'm writing to a friend, so I'm just putting his first name in. I suppose I could put his full name, Dear Thomas Smith, but that to me is a little bit overly formal, so I wouldn't do that. If you did, you might get away with it, you might not. especially at higher bands, like if I'm considering giving somebody 8 and I see a Dear Thomas Smith, I'm going to think, and I might choose to lower the score. I hope this letter finds you in good health. So there's my warm opening, right? And by the way, don't write questions. Don't write, how are you? It's not a phone call. What are you expecting? They write back, I'm fine. And you? You're not on the phone, so don't write questions like that. So I hope this letter finds you in good health and not, are you in good health? So we're putting a statement in here, not a question. Then we get on to our purpose. I'm writing to thank you for the wonderful gift you sent me last week. Now, I suppose you could leave out the soft opening and just get straight into the purpose, and that's kind of okay for this letter. I don't see a problem. But remember what I said earlier about standardizing things. I think there'll be some semi-formal tasks where it might seem a bit cold to just rush straight in with the purpose, right? So I suggest you can get in this habit that when you're writing the semi-formal letter, you've got soft opening followed by purpose, but you must have the purpose. That's the part you can't leave out or your score is going to come tumbling down. And it must be in at the start of the letter, right? Then we want a paragraph to respond to the first bullet point, which is thank them for the present and say why you particularly like it. And I wrote, I really appreciate you remembering my birthday and sending me a wool sweater. I really love how soft the wool is and it feels extremely comfortable when I put it on. It is winter now and I'm really fond of how warm it keeps me. So I've started with a phrase that indicates which bullet I'm responding to. I've used the word appreciate to thank them, and I've pointed out what the present is, and then I've responded to why I particularly like it. And I've got really 2 reasons, right? It feels comfortable and it keeps me warm. That's a good reason to like a wool sweater. But then it's on to bullet point 2. Describe what other presents you received. Let me tell you about the gifts from my parents. Well, Dad splashed out and got me a new smartphone, as he knew I really wanted that. Mom was practically minded as usual and got me a new backpack to go on my next mountain hike. Now, note that the question's written in plural, presents, and if I only put one present, I'm getting 5 for task achievement. That's it. 5 is the maximum you can get. I don't care if you're a native writer. You haven't fully responded to the bullet point. The bullet point says presents, plural. You need to write presents in your response. And if you don't, you're throwing away marks unnecessarily. It might seem cruel and unkind, but that's what happens. And by the way, if you didn't mention the other presents at all, 4 maximum for task achievement because you haven't responded to the bullet point at all. Why would you expect a high score when you've done that, right? So decrease your risk. Make sure you're responding to all bullet points. Be on the lookout for plurality because it can cost you dearly. If you're a Band 8 writer and you only wrote about 1 gift, 5 for task achievement is going to bring you down from a Band 8 to, I think, like a Band 7 maybe even. I haven't done the math on it. So now we're on to the next bullet point. Explain what other things you did. Again, it's in plural, things. So if I just say 1 thing, maximum of 5. So I need at least 2. We celebrated my birthday with some Thai cuisine at that same restaurant as last year. Furthermore, we had frozen yogurt in the park afterward for dessert. So 2 things. Now we've got to finish our letter, and I think we need a sentence before we sign off. I've written, I really hope you can join us in person next year. It would be great to celebrate with you. Yours sincerely, Stephen Smith. Now, for you keen students out there, I've got a couple of things for homework for you to do. The first one I suggest is to read through my model answer and make sure that you understand it. To facilitate that, you can actually download a PDF version. I recommend you do this. It's got my other letter in there. It's also got my model answers to the essay questions. And then the second thing you could do, I have a task that you could write for homework. This will enable you to check your understanding and make sure that you can write all the parts of your letter correctly. I have a writing correction service. I will put details of that in the description below in case you want to use that. Basically what I do is I go through and correct your letter. I give you a band score for each of the 4 criteria, and I give you suggestions about how you can increase your score. So the homework task is, recently you had a holiday overseas and you stayed with a family member who has just sent you a letter and some photos of your holiday. Write a letter to your family member. In your letter, thank him or her for the photos and for the holiday. Explain why you didn't send a letter earlier. Invite your family member to come and stay with you. Alright, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure you download the PDF. If you're interested in an ebook to teach you how to write, there's a link in the description below, and also a link about my writing correction service. Strongly suggest you subscribe to me. This way you'll get details of my videos as I release them. Best of luck for your preparation.